Mobin, what is causing this intense drop against the lira?
So let's get some context here. We've had about a decade of very much near zero rates in the US and in the EU. What that helped do was a lot of borrowers were able to take money from the US, from the EU, and invest it in countries like Turkey that were experiencing very high growth. Now what you're seeing is that trend is reversing. Rates are going up in the US, so it's getting more expensive to borrow there, or it's getting more lucrative to invest in those countries. And at the same time, growth is coming down in Turkey and also in other emerging economies as well. Of course, what that does is that it makes it harder to access funds for companies and for the government in the future. Look, Turkey has about $470 billion of external debt. 70% of that is owed by companies. And those companies need to roll this debt over every once in a while. Of course, as it gets more and more expensive to do that, it becomes harder too, especially because these companies make their money in local currency and have to repay in US dollars. So just to sort of simplify that, a company, let's say, earning 2,500 lira last year or 2 years ago was able to pay back $1,000. Now they need to earn about almost 6,000 lira to be able to pay back 1,000. So of course that is the main problem. Adding to that, in Turkey's situation, is its dependency on fuel imports, which primarily come from Russia and from Iran. And as you know, both of those countries are also in the crosshairs. So there is that fear of where will fuel supplies come from? Will there be financing available for them in the future? And then, of course, US ties, Turkey-US ties, as we know, are not in the best state right now. And of course, getting funding from multilaterals, be it the IMF, be it the World Bank, really depends on that political risk.
I mean, the IMF would be opening a whole other can of worms. Let's talk a little bit about interest rates, because a lot of analysts believe that higher interest rates would have a positive impact here, but Erdogan has always said that he believes higher interest rates cause rather than cure inflation. So how much of an impact do interest rates really have here, and could that be a long-term solution?
So look, there's a lot to be said about the president's view on inflation. Of course, conventional wisdom is that you push up interest rates to combat inflation, but that's not always the case, or the efficacy of that rate change is not the same across, let's say, the advanced economies and economies in which credit is perhaps not that pervasive across the economy. Having said that, if you look at the interest rates in Turkey as of today, the interest rate is about 18%, whereas inflation is lower than that. It's about just over 15%. So interest rates in Turkey are already in positive territory. How much higher they need to go, of course, would be a question better put to economic analysts. Having said that, it may not be enough at this point simply to raise rates. The government needs to look beyond the interest rate.